Hey good folks, I'm here for CG Tuts, and welcome to part 3 of this hard surface modeling tutorial. First things first, we need to save this file under a new title, and this will be the Tugan tutorial part 3. And the next shape we are going to create is the tube that contains the needle. Fortunately, we saved the punches, so I'll reintroduce those and I'll duplicate this punch, and let's unparent it by hitting Shift P. Okay, now let's hide the rest, and now let's see. At the moment this shape is oval and I would like it to be round, so we'll round it up. I would like to scale it up on the y-axis until we get something that's looking about right. At the back part we can get rid of the back faces here, so let's see, let's delete those and let's switch over to the front view. I would like to make this a hollow pipe. Let's mark all of these, unselect these, shift right click, extrude face, and we'll scale it down a bit, something like this should be fine. Okay, we'll hit G to extrude again and we'll extrude it all the way to the back. Let's focus on that for a second. And we'll delete those faces. And we need to fill out these holes here. So what we'll do is select the edge ring and extrude it. And we'll extrude on the z-axis. Let's switch over to the front view so we can see what we are doing here. Okay, we need to connect all of the vertices here, so let's do that real quick. I'll mark these, shift right click, merge vertices to center, mark the next pair, G, 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 and so on. So we've got a hollow pipe. Next, what I would like to do is sharpen up this end of the pipe where the needle is sticking out. Let's mark all the faces, unmark these, and extrude that. Let's say we'll give it 1 more centimeter, and we'll select all the vertices here and scale those down on all axes. And let's see, something of this sort. Now there are various shapes of tubes. Their shape depends on the type of needles the tattoo artist wants to use at the moment. And this one will be a single needle. We'll select the faces once more and extrude it 1 more time. And that's it. We'll need to soften up this part here. So let's select the edge ring and we'll bevel it. Let's tighten up the offset here and we'll give it 2 more seconds. Let's make it 5 and maybe even a bit more of an offset. Okay, well, we need to soften up these edges. Soften, harden edge, soften edge, and that looks better. Okay, now the tattoo gun's tube has a hole here where you can see the needle, and for that purpose I've already went ahead and created a new punch. It's a cylinder in a radius of 1, a height of 3, and subdivision of 40, and I've scaled down the x-axis to be a little bit smaller than the y and z. It's 0.85, and as you can see it punches out this sort of shape out of the tube. I'll duplicate this shape and parent the original one to the punches, so I'll have a reference for later if I'll need one. And now let's see, we'll mark the tube, then the punch, shift right click, Booleans, difference. And now, as before, we have edges that's going nowhere, both vertical and horizontal. If I'll run a cleanup, it would solve all those edges that's going nowhere, but the result will be quite messy. Let's try this for a second. Shift right click, clean up, and we'll hit clean up. And as you can see, it did solve all the edges, but as I said, the result is somewhat messy, and when possible, I rather have the cleanest model I can get. So what I'll do is connect the outer edges to the inner edges. Shift right click, split polygon tool, and I'll start connecting those. I don't really need these edges here, and they're really just in the way, so I'll get rid of those, mark them all, and delete those. Okay, all the unnecessary edges are marked. I'll delete those, and we can go on peacefully connecting the outer edges to the inner ones. Okay, so I've connected all the edges, and now I've got this gap here, which contains only vertices, leftovers from the Boolean action. I do want this shape, and if I'll delete those vertices, I'll lose it. So here's what we're going to do. We'll need to split the polygons here, add some divisions. So we'll shift right click, insert edge loop tool, and the edge loop doesn't go all the way, but we can fix that. And this should be around here, and second one is about here, and the third one is about here. And now we need to do the same in the middle. So this one is about here. Let's switch to side view, and while it's still connected, I'll snap it to the outer edge ring. Okay, this is the middle one, again side view, and it's actually by accident quite accurate. And the last one, and I'll snap it to the outside one. Okay, while we're at it, I'll snap those to be directly under the top vertice. Same goes for these and these. Okay, and now we need to connect those. So shift right click, split polygon tool, we'll connect these, and we'll repeat the process to the other 5 edge loops. This is it. We have finished the punch, and as you can see, the result is a lot more cleaner than Maya's native cleanup utility. Obviously, this method takes a bit longer, but the result is much nicer. These edges here are hardened and need to be softened, and instead of choosing all those edges, what I'll do is select all these edges here and soften those. Shift right click, soften harden edge, soften edge, which leaves me with these edge rings, which are soft and should be hard. So I'll select those, double click on the edge ring. Oh yeah, I forgot the extra vertices here, leftovers from the Boolean action, so I'll just mark all of these and delete the unnecessary vertices. Okay, now we'll select the outer edge ring and the inner one as well. Shift right click, soften harden edge, and our tube is all set and done. Very, very lovely. Now let's switch over to the side view. The tube length over at the backside is a bit too long, so what I'll do is bring it a bit closer to the frame. It needs to be about halfway above the coils, or more like a quarter of the way. Something of this sort, I think, should be fine. We can always change that further on down the line. Next, we'll model the needle. The needle is basically a long cylinder which ends up in a hook over at the backside. This hook connects to the armature bar over here at this point. So let's see. Let's switch over to top view. Let's go to create, CV curve tool. And I'll hit X to snap to the grid. We'll start off here. And 3 centimeters or 3 grid squares later, I'll hit once, twice, and 3 times to create a straight line. Now I'll create the hook. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll hit Q to exit the tool. I would like to have a bit easier control of the curve here, so I'll shift right click and convert NURBS to Bezier. And now if I'll hit F9, you can see the vertices has converted into Bezier handles. And that makes it a bit easier to control those. Now we'll move this one to the center here. We'll snap it to the grid actually. Okay. And straighten that up. This one needs to be here. Okay, this is a very nice shape, I think. Let's switch over to perspective view and let's see. I'll create a cylinder. Create polygon primitives cylinder. And let's see. The radius could be 0.03, very small radius. The height will be 0.01. We'll switch the subdivision axis to 6. It's very small and we won't be able to tell that it's not really round. And we'll set the subdivision caps to 0. Okay, now I would like to rotate it on the x-axis to 90 degrees. And I want to snap it to the start of the CV curve tool. I'll hit C and with the mouse drag it on the CV curve tool to the start of the CV curve tool. I'll choose this face, and in the outliner I'll control choose the CV curve tool. While those two are selected, I'll shift right click and choose extrude face. We need to add more divisions here. I would go even to 150, which looks very nice. Now let's see. We can get rid of this edge ring. It's become unnecessary, and get rid of those vertices. Okay. The polygon is still connected to the curve, and if I'll move the curve around, it will change the shape. However, if I'll move the polygon around, it won't affect the shape, but it is still connected to the curve, which in its turn, if I'll change its shape, it would still affect the curve. For the time being, I like to keep this connection. This way I can alter the shape once the armature bar is created. Okay, so let's see. Let's switch to top view. We don't need the outliner anymore. We'll snap to the grid here, and let's switch to side view. This one needs to be centered to this grid, and let's drag it here. This is about where the armature bar would be, and I can immediately tell that it's too large, so let's take care of this right now. Now I would like to scale it down to something of this sort, maybe even drag this part a bit higher. Okay, maybe even scale it down just a little bit more. And this looks about right. Let's switch over to the side view, switch over to vertex view, choose the last vertices and drag those all the way, well, almost all the way to the end. This is where the needle begins. Since this shape isn't the actual needle, it's a bar that holds the needle. The needle is actually welded to this part here. So what we need to do is create another cylinder. Create polygon primitives cylinder, and we'll set the radius to 0.01. We'll set the subdivisions axis to 6 as well, and we don't need subdivision caps. It needs to rotate on the x-axis to 90 degrees. We'll switch over to the side view and snap it to the grid here. Let's switch to the top view and snap it to the grid here. It's go out here, and it can be a little smaller in dimensions. We'll scale it down on all axes to say 0.8. And let's see, something of this sort, I think. Okay, great. Now let's switch over to the side view and let's see. The needle needs to be a bit longer, so we'll change the height here. Maybe even more. Let's say set it to 2. And something like this. This one needs to be a bit lower, since the needle actually is connected to the top part here. Now, these two actually are welded together, but I'm not going to add the welding mesh, since it's very small and most of it is unseen. Let's start renaming stuff here. This is the tube. This is the needle bar, and this is the needle itself, and we'll group all of these together and we'll rename the group to needle. Let's delete the history here. Edit, delete by type, history. Next we've got the rear divider, the front spring, the armature bar, and the O-ring with its connecting screw. The rear divider is basically this shape here, so we'll duplicate it, place it around here. Let's switch over to the side view, and we need to get rid of these divisions. Since we don't need those, they are just in the way. We'll select these edges, and the same goes for the other side, and delete those. Now we can select all of these, deselect the middle ones, and shift right click, soften harden edge. That takes care of that. This shape needs to be a lot thinner, so we'll scale it down on the Z axis. Something of this sort, I think. So let's make it 0.15. We'll place it here. So this one needs to go all the way down here. Snap the pivot to the right side. We'll snap the shape to the frame. Okay. Now we need to make some adjustments to the rear spring here. As you can see, the rear spring has some rotation backwards on the x-axis, and we need to push it back a bit. Let's bring back the outliner. Since I would need this punch here to create the contact screw, what I'll do is duplicate this one, unparent it, and then parent it to the rear spring, and then I'll just hide it. Let's hide the punches again. I'll set the pivot at the bottom here. Now we need to parent the screw as well. So the rear spring screw is a child of the rear spring. And let's bring it back a bit and rotate it on the x-axis. Next is the front spring. So let's see. We'll duplicate this one and move it backwards on the z-axis. We actually needed to snap to this point. Okay. And let's see. This should be fine. Now we need to add a division here to the front spring. Let's drag it aside so we can walk on it a bit more easily. I would like to add the division I've had before here. So shift right click, split polygon tool, split it this way on both sides. Now let's move it back inside. Great. Now we need to scale the top part So I'll choose all these vertices and scale those down on the x-axis as well as the z-axis. And we need to eyeball this until we get the correct shape. Okay, I think this is about it. A little bit higher, something like this. And it needs to go a bit back. Now if I'll just drag it back on the z-axis, I'll get sort of a weird shape, which is not really what I'm after. So I'll need to rotate it back with the pivot centered at the bottom here. So I'll change the pivot and snap it to this vertex here and rotate it back on the x-axis to something of this sort, I would say. The rear spring can rotate a bit back as well. Okay. We'll need to add a screw here which holds the O-ring. We'll duplicate this screw for that and we'll need to unparent it. And we'll rotate it back to 180. It needs to be around here, I would say. And we can move these vertices over here, snap it. Now let's start renaming stuff here. This one is the rear divider, and this one is the front spring. This one is the O-ring screw. And before we'll create the O-ring itself, we'll create the armature bar. We'll start off with a cube. Create, polygon primitives, cube. We'll zero it out and let's place it in the back. Its height is approximately the same height as the front spring. So let's see. This should be fine, I think. Okay, so let's make it around 4.4. The depth can be a bit smaller, let's say 0.4. The width should be 2. We'll add 3 more divisions to the width and 1 more division to the depth. Let's select the width edge rings. We'll switch to the top view and using the scale tool, we bring those closer until we get something more like this. A bit more of a square shape. Now let's select the middle edge loops and shift right click, bevel edge, and let's see, we'll use 5 segments or even 6 and offset those. I'll switch to the top view and select these inner edges and deselect the ones on the bottom. And now we can delete those. We don't need this square here. Now I would like to create the tip which holds the needle. Easiest way to create a round shape is to use a reference. So I'll create a cylinder. Create polygon primitives, cylinder. We want to make the divisions 36. Let's scale the cylinder reference here in the radius to 0.19. The height will be 0.1. And we don't really need those subdivisions caps. Switch over to the side view. Place it in the top here. And we'll snap it to the middle on the side view as well as the top view. Okay, so let's see, we actually have 24 vertices here, so we'll need to change the subdivisions axis from 36 to 24. And now we need to snap the inner square vertices to the cylinder reference. We'll snap it on the X and Z axis. And we'll need to repeat the process to all these vertices. So I'll pause the recording and we'll continue on from there. Okay, all said and done. We have converted the inner shape from a square to a circle, and we can get rid of the reference. We'll select the face here, and we'll shift right click, extrude face. We'll extrude it on the Z axis and scale it down a bit. and we'll extrude it again. Something of this sort should be fine. Now, come to think of it, the first extrusion could be a little bit smaller in scale, so we'll scale it down a bit. We'll extrude this top shape one more time. Shift right click, extrude face, move it up and scale it inside. Maybe not so high, something of this sort. And again, I went overboard with the first extrusion. So let's say 0.75. This is more like it. Okay. Now we need to soften up these edges. So let's select this edge ring, making sure all the edges are selected. And shift right click, bevel edge, offset it. Something like this should be fine. We'll select this edge ring and bevel that as well. We'll give it a bit more segments, let's say 5, and offset it. So we get something more round here. And same goes for these. We'll bevel them both. Shift right click, bevel edge. Let's see, let's give them more of an offset. All in all, we've got a pretty nice shape here going on. Now let's take care of this irregularity that's going on here. These two vertices need to be lined up in the y-axis to these, and this one as well. Okay, that takes care of that. Now we probably, we need to soften up some of the edges here. But before we do that, let's mark the outer edges here and bevel those. Shift right click, bevel edge. We'll offset it a bit. Nothing too drastic. This looks fine. And as you can see, we've got some irregularities here. So here's what we're going to do. We would need to get rid of some of these faces here and then recreate those. So let's get rid of this one, this one, and this one, and same goes for the other side. Now let's focus on the inside to see what's going on here. And we can get rid of this one and this one. We'll move this vertice to this vertice's position on the Z and Y axis, and we'll merge those together. Shift right click, merge vertices to center. We'll select this one and snap it to this one on all axes. Same goes for the other side. And we need to merge those together. And now we'll select this edge ring, shift right click, fill hole. We need to do the same on the other side. We'll hit G. And we need to continue this division here. So shift right click, split polygon tool. We'll split it from this point to this point. And do the same to this side. And that takes care of the double faces issue we had here. And we need to do the same to the other side. So I'll pause the recording and go ahead and do that. So now both sides are connected properly. All we have left to do is soften up the edges. We'll mark all the edges. Shift right click, soften harden edge, soften edge. And our armature bar is fully created. Let's snap it back to the middle and place it in the right position. Okay, and now we can safely move the needle's hook to the correct position. And we can even scale it down a bit. Okay, and the armature bar can be a bit higher, at least the top part. The last part we'll be creating for this chapter will be the O-ring. This part right here. So let's hide the rear spring for a second so we can work on the O-ring a bit easier. We'll switch over to the front view and we'll turn on wireframe on shaded. Okay, now let's create a CV curve tool. Create CV curve tool. I'll snap it to the grid and create 3 more points for it and snap it again. And we can't really see the curve tool because it's been created over here. So we'll just need to select it in the outliner and bring it here. Now let's convert the vertices to Bezier. Shift right click, convert NURBS to Bezier. Let's move it on a side view to the correct position. And now let's see. We'll move this one a bit down. And this one needs to be a lot more rounded than it is at the moment. Okay, this one can be rounder as well. And we need to stretch these both on the x-axis, so we'll use the scale tool for that. Okay, maybe this one a bit more. This looks about right. Let's create a cylinder to extrude along this path. Create polygon primitives, cylinder. And I would say the radius could be 0.1, the height should be 0.01, and we don't need subdivision caps. 20 on the subdivision axis should be fine. Now let's snap it to the CV curve tool by hitting C, and we'll rotate it on the z-axis to 90 degrees. Okay, so now let's select this face and bring back the outliner, and we'll control select the curve, shift right click, extrude face, and we need to increase the amount of divisions we've got here. Let's give it a bit more, let's say 50 or even 100. Okay, and I think it's too thick, so what we'll need to do is scale down the radius 0.07, and I think it works fine. Let's bring back the front string. Okay, we need to add some adjustments here, and of course I would need to do that by adjusting the curve's vertices, but to reach the curve it's not that simple. So what I'll need to do first is bring back the status line. There it is. Over here we've got the buttons that presents what I can select from the work area by clicking on. And I'll deselect the surface button, and now I can't select the surface. However, I can select the curves, and there it is. I've just selected the curve, and I'll switch to vertex view. We can bring this a bit higher and maybe extrude it a bit more outside. We can bring this one a little backwards and just a little bit more higher, a bit more inside. Okay, same goes for this side. Let's bring it a bit to the front. Okay, and just a little bit more. Great, let's bring back the surface selection, and now I can select everything as before, and we don't need this shelf anymore. Let's run a clean house here. This cube is the armature bar. This one is the O-ring. We'll place it next to the O-ring screw. I'm happy with the way that the O-ring is looking, and so I will delete its history to get rid of the link to the curve. Edit, delete by type, history, and now we can easily delete the curve. And I'll do the same for the needle. I'll mark the needle bar and edit, delete by type, history, and delete its curve. That brings to conclusion this third part of this tutorial. In the next part, we'll continue on modeling the different parts.